Good evening and welcome to Taking the Initiative. I'm Reverend Bill Kunze. I'm the host here on Taking the Initiative for these conversations with leaders in our community, with leaders in the nonprofit sector and public service who are making a difference in the places where you live and where you work. Before we get started, I want to point out to you how you can get more information about Taking the Initiative and get in contact with us, and that is by going to our website, www.takingtheinitiative.com. We'd love to hear from you there. We've got 3 or 4 years of archives of shows. If you missed any, just choose the ones you're interested in and watch them on your computer at home. But now watch us here, because I've got a special show for you tonight. We're fortunate here in Eastern Pennsylvania that in almost every community, there are organizations that are helping people who are in need. And we like to bring those stories to you so that you'll know what's going on, so that you can pitch in and help, so that you can start something like it in your own community. That's what we're doing this evening in a conversation with the Executive Director of Project of Easton. Welcome back. My guest this evening is Janice Komisor. She is not the executive director, but the chief executive officer of Project of Easton. Janice has been with Project for over 20 years in a variety of capacities. I guess we met back when you were in a different capacity the first time, and the executive director since 2007. In addition to all her professional duties, she's a wife, a mother, who likes to run and to read. I like to hike and to read, so we ought to be able to get along here.
Yes,
right?
I'm sure we will.
Good to have you here,
Yeah, I'm
Janice.
happy to be here.
Just already on the screen, the name of Project has appeared, and I don't want our audience to think that our technicians have a problem typing capitals. I wonder if you could talk about your name and therefore the background of your organization for which it stands.
It is always the first question anyone asks, is why the funny punctuation? And it's a great story. The agency was founded in 1968. It was a time some of us remember, tremendous turbulence. People were demanding social and economic change. And there were people in Easton who actually feel very inspired by their story. I've met some of the founders. And these were folks who looked at their community and said, you know, this isn't right. There were riots in Easton, along with many, many other towns and cities. And they said, this isn't right, you know, and the nice part of the story is they said, they didn't say, who's going to do something about it? They said, we're going to do something about it. So it was clergy, a group of clergy were instrumental, along with other community leaders. But the capital P, J, and C stand for Protestant, Jewish, and Catholic. We are not a faith-based organization. In fact, I think we're quite different than a faith-based organization, but not in a way that people may understand. I met one of the founders, John Steinbrook, a few years back, and he explained it was an interfaith. It was intentionally an interfaith initiative. And if you'll remember, Catholics weren't really accustomed to speaking to the Jews weren't speaking to Protestants. This was not a customary way of working together. And this was an initiative to bring all people of goodwill together so that they could create collective change. Now, everybody talks about collective change today. It's a very popular term, a great way of thinking, but really 45 years ago, almost 46 years ago, our founders were on that. And so it stands for Protestant, Jewish, and Catholic, but we're not based only in those faiths. We feel a great affinity to all people of goodwill, and we hope that we can find their support.
I wonder if now Easton is a small city, and with similarities to many other small cities, and even in our viewing area, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the need for an organization like Project. What are the issues? What are the needs that you see in that community? And why? Why are they there?
Again, I think that Easton is probably like many other cities across the nation, small towns. I think the need is everywhere in our country, unfortunately. And of course, poverty is again at an all-time high, as it was in the 60s, but again, it's still a problem. I think that too often we think we're going to solve poverty with relatively simple solutions. Sometimes I think we feel that good intentions and acts of kindness will fix poverty. And of course it does take those, but it also takes smart programming, and it takes an organized approach. And I would say, if we're fighting a war on poverty, then we have got to build an army, and I don't think we have one. We have a very fractured system, full of good intentions and lots of hard work, and I think the nonprofit community works against all odds. But I think we need the larger world, the wider world, to assist us and look at this and say, this is an economic development issue. You can't hope that you'll build thriving communities where businesses prosper when you have critical masses of poor people living in a segregated part of your community. They tax your schools, they tax your real estate base, and all sorts of other things that matter to the wider world. And in fact, I think it's hard to say we live in a civilized society if we're ignoring these problems. And I also believe that poverty is complex. It's not one thing. The people we see don't have one problem. They're living in an ecology of poverty. And we see services. You can send your child over here for high quality preschool. You might be able to go over here to get adult literacy classes. But what we see are people who need to sign up for adult literacy classes, and they also need their children to be in a high quality preschool so they can attend, and then they need bus transportation to get to the first day of a job. They need adequate health care, including mental health care. It's all of these things, and so without a coordinated system of services, which we don't have, we have lots of service, not necessarily coordinated. I think we repeatedly fail to solve the larger problem, even though I think nonprofits like Project are doing an outstanding job of addressing parts of the problem.
Let me kind of play a devil's advocate here. Part of, I hear people say, and I think wrongly, that, well, you've been fighting this war on poverty for now 40 years, and it's been a waste of money. We ought to just stop, right? Let people just take care of themselves, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, whatever jargon they're using. How do you respond to that kind of thinking?
Well, I breathe deeply first, and then I understand that's an equation. People are looking for return on investment, and I understand that thinking. The problem, again, I think, is that we don't have, people assume there are government safety nets that work. There are some safety nets funded by the government, but they too have massive holes in them. They're not well coordinated with one another. In other words, people living in poverty, again, I think of it as a vortex. You have one problem, and then it creates 5 more problems. You might find a job, but now you need a car that'll run that gets you to the job. So this vortex requires systems thinking and systems planning. And in order to get a return on investment, that kind of coordination has to happen. And really, this in a corporate life would be research and development would be thrown at this problem. And we're going to end up trying to create coordinated systems with the small change that we have to provide services. There's another great topic I hope we can talk about on this whole idea of, I read a great article on the nonprofit partnership website. It was, I think the title was something about builders versus buyers. And the environment in which we work is we have buyers, we have funders out there who say, well, I'd like 10 of this outcome and maybe 20 of this, and and then you have to create this social change by the end of the fiscal year. And yes. And I get that. I understand why they're doing that. They want accountability. But we also have got to start thinking about finding people willing to invest in smart thinking, smart planning, and social change is going to require people to find innovative ways of working together and to take risks. And when you're working in a buying system where you've got to get 10 outcomes by June, risk-taking becomes very difficult. And so it's a great article and a great website.
And some of the outcomes don't even count in social change. For example, you have a variety of programs to just basically save lives, almost, save health, save, and one very close to my heart is, of course, your programs for people who are food insecure or hungry. I wonder if you would talk about that, because I love that you're doing it.
Yes, yeah. Actually, our agency has wondered over the years, are we working where we're needed most? Are we working where we do have the best skills? And when I was named the executive, I felt that people are whole. Their problems are whole. They're not fractured. You can't send a family over to get one little service over here. It won't fix the problem. So I looked at what we'd been doing for years and what we hoped to do in the future. And I thought about Maslow's hierarchy, and people need food before they can think about improving their skills and that kind of thing. They need security with basic needs. So we have a triangle. We think of Maslow when we draw this triangle. But we believe, and what we say is that our work starts with hope first, which sometimes people might say, oh, well, whatever, what does that mean? And I think it's a really critical component of what we do and how we work. If people don't have hope, they won't have a vision for the future. And I was just sharing this thought with someone yesterday saying, advertisers have figured that out a long time ago. If you don't hope to drive the car of your dreams one day, well, you're not going to be aiming for it. So, hope is a real thing that motivates people. So we start with hope. We believe that people also sometimes just need help. They just need food. They need a safe shelter. Before we can hope that they'll have the time and the ability and the willingness to focus on building skills, real life skills, that then lead to opportunity. So that's the way we think of our service, our network of services, our continuum of care. It's hope, it's help, it's building skills and helping them to find opportunity. Do we do it perfectly all the time? No, but our intentions are to find smart systems that help people get on a path that doesn't lead to detours and dead ends.
So tell me about those services, including food at that first level.
Yes, our food pantry is, we think it's the largest food pantry in Northampton County, but the size of the food pantry doesn't matter so much to me. We do serve at least 700 people a month. That number climbs. We've seen a different type of person coming to the pantry over the last several years. People who have not been chronically poor, but people who have become poor because they lost their jobs and the recession was very difficult. We've seen seniors who can't make ends meet on Social Security, people who are just devastated that they're in a food pantry line. So that's different than a chronically poor population. And among the chronically poor, in case people have the wrong impression of what chronically poor looks like, in many cases these are folks who are the elderly, disabled, mentally ill, cognitively impaired, and then there are some people who've just made bad decisions as well. But really,
or maybe a combination.
Right. But the point is we cannot think of poverty and those living in it as one. It's not one caste, one stamp of people. It's a cross section of many things. And our food pantry, for years, we've offered fresh foods, and we're concerned about the quality of the food that our folks can get.
That's a really important theme these days, and you're doing then a lot of things that build on that have more permanent impact, if you will, that I want to get to right after these public service announcements, so stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm Reverend Bill Kunze, and I am talking with Janice Komisor, the CEO. A relatively new title, that's why I've stumbled over it a few times, the Project of Easton. Janice, I mentioned during one of the breaks that for me, when I think of project, though it's one segment of your work, I think of your literacy work. I think of you getting awards for your literacy work. Part of it is literacy work with children. So probably no better way to help people once they've got some basic needs met. So would you talk about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As you mentioned earlier, I've been with Project for more than 20 years. And I started out in the literacy programs, developing the literacy programs. And when they grew tremendously over the years, we were tiny little, maybe a $40,000 program, and it blossomed and grew into, I don't know, maybe $800,000 worth of service, if we can measure service with money. So I'm an educator. It's near and dear to my heart. I think as a country we value education tremendously, and we believe that this is how people pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I think the important thing to remember with that is that people need to also learn the social mechanisms for using their educational skills. And one of the key principles at Project is that we believe in providing education services. We have a very rich array of services, which I hope I can talk about. But we also believe we need to offer the social supports to learners who have been disadvantaged over the years, economically, socially, culturally, perhaps. And not everyone knows then, what do you do when you have your GED? You need some ability to know what the next steps are and how to manage yourself in your environment.
I would think that some people watching would think, but isn't all that provided in the schools for which we pay taxes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of people do assume that. And I think the schools, in many, many cases, are doing a great job. And yet you do read statistics about how our country is falling behind other industrialized nations. My understanding of the data is if you pull out the economically disadvantaged children, we rise up to towards the top of performance among other industrial nations.
So we're failing with exactly the people
Yes.
you're serving.
We're failing with that group, and we're failing because their needs have become, they are complex and they become more complex as children advance through the system. We have children entering school not ready to learn. What we know is that children will enter school economically disadvantaged children will enter school behind their more advantaged peers in reading skills or readiness for reading.
So let's pause right there. So what are you trying to do about that?
We have, again, we know how to teach someone how to read. We know what the reading research is. And why aren't we using it more and more? We use it. We have an array of literacy programs, both for all levels of adult learners, non-readers, sometimes called illiterate. We don't love that word because we believe that people have many types of literacy, ways of understanding the world. But so the very low literate to people who just need to brush up and get the GED, they may have dropped out of school unexpectedly before they graduated. And we teach English as a second language. We also have a family literacy program, which I'd love to talk about later. But I want to go back to the school-age literacy programs that we run. That is, we know that children enter school behind their more advantaged peers, and every summer they lose more. So you can see here are advantaged children, here are disadvantaged children. And it's a recipe. Nobody likes to bang their head against a wall. Children go to school in order to learn how to read, and then they have to read in order to learn. That whole cycle, if reading doesn't develop, they're lost, and then we have dropout rates. So it's not hard to understand what's wrong. So we run a program where we're offering evidence-based reading strategies with certified teachers, and we're holding those reading scores up. We're not only keeping them from sliding back in the summer, but we're even seeing some increase in the scores, so that these children go back more able to keep up with their peers.
So you track how the children scores change as a result of your intervention with your programs.
Yes, yes. We at Project we talk a little bit about, we've created a rubric that describes, there's activity-based programming, which many of us have engaged in over the years. Getting the kids into a fun summer activity is a great thing to do. It keeps them from sitting in front of TV all summer, or hanging out with a gang, or being identified by the gangs. So that's an activity that's totally worthwhile, has tremendous benefits. But my feeling is, if we've got those kids for 6 weeks, and we know what the real underlying issue that's going to lead to their failing out of school, and then failing to find work, and failing to be able to participate constructively in their worlds, why aren't we going to offer it to them? Why not offer them fun, developmentally appropriate reading opportunities? Because reading is the way that we access information still today. We get a lot of our information electronically, but you still have to read in order to know your world and understand it and turn information into knowledge. We need to read, and so I'm a huge believer in education, as I think many people in the country are.
Do the children in the community you're serving, and of low-income children, want to be in those programs? Spend my summer learning how to improve my reading?
Well, you have to fool them into believing it's not summer school, but yes, I'm always quite surprised and pleased when I visit our Sizzle program. The kids are having fun, but again, in the hands of qualified teachers with a curriculum that's developmentally appropriate. Sometimes people think, oh, they don't want to be sitting at a desk during the summer. Well, learning, we have to get past the idea that learning isn't fun. It should be fun, and it can be fun, and our kids are having a great time. And we have tremendous corporate support, and we offer fun activities for the kids, and we'd love to take these programs like this one to scale. But again, that requires more resources.
To scale, expanding out of your community in Easton.
Yeah,
part of your dream.
Expanding within Easton, because we're not serving all of the children in need, and expanding beyond Easton. If it's I always say, if we did something right once, this is how people make good widgets in corporate America. We made a good widget, can we make 100,000 of them? Well, this is different, but it's still true that if we can use best practices, understand how to implement them correctly, and create social benefit and social change for people, then let's do more of it. Let's figure out how to do more of it. And it does also require building partnerships with other people, because we don't believe Project is going to solve all of these problems alone.
But you'd be, right now for the last few years, I've been pastoring a small church in Wind Gap, beginning of the Slate Belt, and you'd be surprised how service poor that area is up there. So
I'm not surprised. We're aware of that.
Keep it in mind.
Yes.
Now,
great idea.
One of your newest wrinkles at Project that the United Way has been supportive of is focused on seniors.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a senior now, so I'm interested.
Yes.
No, but it is one of your newest programs. I wonder if you'd talk about that.
Yeah, the Gold Card program is, as I was saying to you earlier, we have, the need is out here this big, and our resources are about this big. And we've decided that we need to target populations because of that problem. And we've considered the real issues, the growing senior population. The need is tremendous in that population. There's a lot of food insecurity. But what we also know is that the quality of the food they're able to find is incredibly important. They need low sodium, they need low sugar. They don't necessarily understand the health issues that their doctors send them away with ideas on how they should conduct their lifestyles. And the other thing we found is that many of the seniors who've come to our pantry over the years, it may be one of the only social contacts they have during a week. And so we've tried to, we're looking at that and saying, let's find some time to assess their needs, make referrals to other organizations that may have the ability to help them in ways that we don't. And we happen to have two wonderful new staff. One is an RN, Brandon Pariser, and the other is an LPN, a retired LPN who's now come back to work at Project, and she's an LPN, and we're doing body mass index screenings, blood pressure screenings, and trying to just keep a closer eye on how our seniors are managing. What some of us who are not, older seniors, we know the right thing to do sometimes, we just don't always do it. So we're trying to support that initiative and reduce some of the healthcare costs in our community.
So you're wrapping around some basic health care with nutritional services, which are obviously intimately connected.
Promoting fresh foods.
And we're running out of time. I give you 30 seconds for a last message to our audience.
I guess the last message is we have support from many, many sources, government, state and federal, national foundations, but the most important support of all is local. And I think it starts, before we even talk about money, it's a community collective will that needs to be focused on changing our world. We need to believe we can, and I hope that we can promote that kind of thinking.
And not only related to project, but in every community where everybody is watching. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts and about your good work, Janice, and thank you for tuning in. We'll be here again next week at the same time, same channel. And until then, there's more Positively Different television here on TV 60.